our Focus On panels, where we bring together people who I believe are experts in their field to discuss a particular topic that hopefully, if you're watching this live on a replay, you'll find of interest. Who knows? But we're doing it anyway. So normally we have three. We've only got two today, but the cream of the crop. So I'm sure it will be as entertaining as it normally is. So before we dive in, if we just sort of get you guys to introduce yourself. So Judith, who are you? And what do you do?
I'm Judith Hanson, and I'm a master practitioner, etc., etc. Is work with people primarily, and that's it.
Okay. And Jackie, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Jackie Sherman. I'm the consultant's consultant. I help people who've come out of employment and set up on their own as a consultant to market themselves and to get all the wonderful clients they want for their services. I'm also the chair of the Green Business Network, which is a non-for-profit organisation helping people with their sustainability agendas. So that's me.
That sounds like there's enough to keep you busy there, Jackie. So today we just thought we'd look at how you can learn from our mistakes and possibly make fewer of them. So that's the overarching conversation. If you are listening to this, watching this, you can put comments on whatever platform you're on and we should be able to bring those up. So if you've got questions or anything you want to add to the conversation, then feel free to do that. So Judith, do you want to kick off then with your slant and how you sort of see this topic and share your insights?
Brief introduction. I am an NLP master. NLP is the study of human behaviour, finding out how people do things, teach them to other people who can't, and it has a number of functions. The rest of us would call assumptions, and there's no such thing as failure. And I really it is saying exactly the same thing. We learn from our mistakes, or we can if we choose to do so. There is from not doing. Are you okay?
I can't hear you.
Oh, well, the only thing there is a little bit of a delay, but she is coming through my end, so I don't know whether you could turn it.
I can't hear her. So
turn it up a little bit, maybe. And okay, Karen, Judith.
Right. Sorry,
I thought it was fixed. I struggled with this principle. We can suffer from not learning and when we make a mistake, which when we do something wrong, we can go in two directions. We can, well, that was a bit unfortunate, and I feel, what would I do differently now? Handle this differently this time, and learning. Allow yourself to be a bit upset or cross, but then positive approach to what's happened. Cognitive behavioural therapy, which I also use. There is a version of the model which is our thought determine our feelings, our behaviour, and our behaviour. So if post a mistake or start thinking, oh my goodness gracious me, why did I do that? I should have known better, etc., etc., etc. I'm sure we all know inside your head. I believe don't talk to another human being the way we talk to one. So those sort of feeling pretty rubbish. You know, you feel inadequate, you feel stupid, whatever. And that in turn affects your behaviour. So for a business or a mistake, behave differently and in a negative, and that will feed into your view of yourself, and we just go around in an endless down. It is actually not just, it is vital that you, at the point of reviewing what's happened, much more positive, i.e., okay, done that, but what can I, so that's my
Okay. You just sounds to be breaking up a little bit, Judy. So I'm not sure how we'll get on. I mean, for me, I think it is I guess to an extent, it is a bit of a social conditioning that a mistake equals wrong, doesn't it? I just think, you know, whenever you made a mistake when you're younger, you get chastised by your parents or your elders or whatever. And I think that just creates something in your head where you automatically think you've done something wrong. I learned years ago that a mistake is just something you did that didn't work. So therefore, you know, what can you do differently? What would you do to change it next time? And you know, to try not to beat yourself up. But I guess it's human nature, isn't it, to you know, just have this negative conversation with yourself about something that you interpret as doing wrong. What about you, Jackie? Where do you sit on this and your view on learning from our mistakes?
I think we can learn from our mistakes without beating ourselves up, but it's often how you feel about all that stuff you said, your conditioning. You know, we're not allowed to make mistakes. I remember having some counselling about it myself many years ago, and from my GP of all people, who said, you need to remember, Jackie, that being imperfect is what makes you lovable. I've always followed that through, sort of. So if I make a mistake, I say I'm just practicing my lovability. So
I must be really lovable then.
But we all are.
It certainly worked for me, of getting a sense of perspective about what the mistake is, you know. And what you could do differently. But first of all, it's allowing yourself to make mistakes to a degree. Depends on what the outcome of the mistake was. You know, I used to be in healthcare, and you couldn't make mistakes on a lot of stuff because people's lives were at stake. So it depends on what it is. But I think it is also having a method for looking at mistakes so that you don't keep repeating it. Certainly, you're a coach, Judith, and you know that sort of getting into a pattern of behaviour where you repeat your mistakes over and over again, and it's breaking that cycle and looking at things differently. I love your bit, Paul, about mistakes are just things which didn't work out this time. So that's very true, but it is trying to break that mistake, and there are tools you can use to help people break out of mistakes. Often first thing is recognizing it as a pattern, as something that you do keep repeating, can help. But first of all, I think you have to admit that you've made a mistake, or that a mistake has happened, or something, you've got the wrong outcome for what you're trying to achieve, and then step back and analyze it properly, and get back to the root of what's the problem, what's causing you to always repeat that. And certainly when I'm coaching people, when they get that insight, then they break that cycle. Don't you find that, Judith? When they have that aha moment, that's usually when you know they're going to go a different route. So does that make sense? It's a bit waffly, but
no, that makes sense. I mean,
there isn't a one. I prefer to call it learning by results rather than learning by mistakes. You know, did you get the result you wanted? No, right. What can I do different this time?
But I guess it's important in a coaching context for sometimes for people to make their own mistakes in order that they can move forward, because sometimes that's the only way maybe that they're going to have that experience of, you know, making that particular mistake, whatever it might be. You know, because there is a tendency, I think, certainly when I'm working with people, is to not necessarily give them the answer, or not tell them how to do it, or not sort of push them down a particular direction. You know, sometimes people have to make their own choices, even though you might see them going down a dead end. You know, in some cases, I guess it's important that they find that out for themselves, rather than, you know, us putting our fix-it hat on.
Oh, yeah. So avoid, oh, you should have done this. Yeah.
We do not fix. It came into my head while you were both talking. I NLP training, and I was doing an exercise, and I think I don't know if I was being clear. I just sort of oh, for goodness sake, I'm going to have to, never going to be perfect. And it is, welcome to the human race, Judith, is perfect. And yeah, Jackie, you can't make mistakes in a medical situation because you are a human being. And you may work a lot harder than the rest of us. Not do get made, and we all. The other thing that came to mind when we were talking about coaching, a father who I now realise was a lot worse when he was around, and certainly when I was in. It's a shame you have to make money from them, but you can't tell, shouldn't be telling people what to do. My approach is very much about stuff they've done, is the open questions and let them explore that's safe and okay. It's the right, rather than what we tend to do as humans. If something awful has happened and we feel blame, we just sit on it. And the deep recesses of our mind where and keeps coming back. I am ambivalent about mistakes. Again, going back to my NLP, making mistakes is how we learn. You know, if you think about learning everything, but something we've all got experience of, you know, you learn by your mistakes after you've finished. Mistakes in my book are an opportunity for making changes. You and I, people who have got in, because there's a part of our brain that automatically, things like driving, for instance, does it if it sees us doing something on a regular basis. It just happens. We don't have to even, and that's where these mistakes get entrenched, because we've made a sensible judgment that this is okay. You know, I'm driving along, hitting curbs every time I go round a corner. Well, automatic. You know, I'm not going to change it. So, just spending an awful lot of money on you.
Yeah, so you're still breaking up a little bit, Julie. I think just about getting I don't think this platform likes you for some reason. I think there's some people it singles out to not make it a perfect connection. I don't know why. I can't help it.
It doesn't give me an opportunity to use.
Say that again.
It doesn't give me the opportunity to choose.
Yeah, you've got a settings button at the bottom, so you can select a different microphone or a different camera.
But that's my, that's my, at the bottom at what point?
Of the screen, that we're looking at, there's a little cog-shaped thing. If you click on that, it comes up with different options for video and audio and stuff. Anyway, while you're looking at that, so I think you touched on the I guess to an extent you've got to give yourself permission to be imperfect, haven't you, Jackie? Otherwise, you are going to spend most of the time beating yourself up every time something happens that doesn't work. What about in terms of? I guess you must come across people that are doing the same thing over and over again and don't seem to be learning from their mistakes. How do you break them out of that pattern? You know, they just seem to be doing the same things, you know, and getting the same results, which isn't moving them forward. Do you have any sort of tips around that?
I think it's often find that getting people to write it down and sort of analysing it and writing down and then look at it, people often can see the mistake or can see the problem, but the first person they've got to admit it to is themselves before they can bring it out to look at it. I find a paper and getting people to visualize it or to see the whole thing often helps. And sometimes I remember my coaching supervisor saying to me, one of the questions she'd asked, has this ever happened to you before? You know, in some ways, so people often that's the first time they've recognised that it's a pattern, because at the superficial level it doesn't look like the same issue, but underneath it is. So, but I find doing a paper exercise where they're writing it out and then they see it all. Often people get the insight. I think it also, as a coach, it's that you've developed a trusting and a safe environment beforehand. So it's okay in coaching to make your mistakes or to admit them, where you didn't feel you wouldn't feel able in other ways. You know, someone's got to trust you to. It's got to trust you with that information about themselves, and so, you know, setting up your psychological contract with your client and making sure they feel safe to say anything to you is really quite important.
Yeah,
I know you feel the same about that, Judith. So yeah.
If I had 10 of, sorry. If I had a 10 of everybody who said I have known this, then yeah, I'd have some. So yes, people, huge advantage of coaching. This coach is as you know, that you're embroiled in what you're thinking about outside looking at it. As you said, it's finding that wider perspective, immediate situation, but standing back and thinking, as we've all said, how can more like this before, and if so.
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier, Jackie. I think there are some industries and maybe some bosses where it makes it difficult for people to feel to acknowledge that they've made a mistake. Obviously, the medical industry is quite a critical one. But I guess, you know, what do you do if you've got a boss that you perceive, you know, doesn't accept any mistakes and sort of wields the stick and makes sure that, you know, everything is perfect? How do you handle something like that?
You get another job.
Yes.
There is
Yeah.
that there.
Seriously, I mean, if because you're much more likely to make mistakes, actually, if you're constantly under pressure to be perfect, because it almost talks you into it. You're so frightened of getting it wrong that you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And most of us have experienced that, like in your driving test, So, but if you're really working with someone who doesn't allow you to make a mistake, I think that's not a good person to work for. And unless you have some kind of relationship that you can bring that out into the open. But the very fact that that person feels like that probably means that it's extremely difficult to do that. The other point I'd make is make sure that you're not blaming others yourself, that you're not that boss who won't allow people to make mistakes.
And we haven't talked about it. We all know people whose response to a offensive. It was this economic climate. It was this person do not take responsibility for and the results of their actions approach to life, which means change. They don't grow, they don't learn.
Yeah, I think another thing that I learned on my journey is, we're very good as human beings at coming up with reasons, justifications, and excuses, which usually, as you've touched on, Judith, puts the blame over there, doesn't it? Doesn't put it with all the responsibility somewhere else, rather than with the. I mean, blame again is another word that I guess I should get rid of out of my dictionary. That slipped out. But yeah, I think there is that. As soon as you start coming up with a reason why something didn't happen, or justifying it, or making all those excuses, and we do it all the time, then I think that's where we stop taking responsibility, and also I think we limit ourselves in terms of what we can do about that. Because if we think that it's something external that's influencing us in whatever way, then we're gonna blame that external influence and not look at what the actions are that maybe we can take to make a difference.
Yes, it's a kind of cop-out if you're not careful, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we have lots of examples in public life of this happening to anybody, but there are certain groups seem to spend their whole life blame which they could be deemed responsible. It's almost become an acceptable thing.
Yeah, I'll just pop up a few comments from Masonda, who's tuning in. So she liked the give yourself permission to make mistakes. You're welcome, Masonda. You can have that and use it. And also that she prefers to learn from others, then attempt it, trying also to avoid those mistakes if I see them coming. I think that's certainly, if I look at, part of the reason for me setting up the business community was to, help small businesses not make the same mistakes that all of us have made on our journey. And I think, you see it time and time again that certainly when people start up their own business, they are going to fall into some of the traps that all of us probably fell into when we started our business all those years ago. And, I often sort of like say this, don't make the same mistakes that we made, make different ones, and learn from that, and we might also learn from it as well. Okay, is Jackie letting her husband out, or a husband in, or maybe
no,
the dog?
It's a dog. You might be able to see her ears.
I can see the
one of your wolves has joined us. One of your wolves wants some input on the thing. Yeah. So I think one of the things we put at the original topic, was making fewer mistakes. Is that something that maybe in the nature of what we talked about, it sounds like on the whole, it's not a bad thing to make mistakes. There's always an opportunity to move forward from anything that you do that doesn't work in your life. Is there a method of making fewer mistakes? Is that something that is worth putting any energy on? Have you got any ideas about that?
Well, take advantage of your training and keeping your own skills up to date as well. You know, it's not, oh, it's okay to make a mistake. I can just make any mistake I like, you know. And it's knowing your limitations as well, and when you need somebody else's advice on how to approach something or that, you know, you need a bit of humility, that you haven't always got the answer yourself, or you don't always know how to do something. And you know, not many of us get in a car the first time and just drive away, do we? We have to learn how to. And we wouldn't get very far without the highway code firmly in our head either. Mind you, you do see some people and you wonder. But so that's the first thing, isn't it? Is to make sure that you've learned, that you've trained, and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about you, Judith? Is there any mileage in helping people make fewer mistakes, or is it just making sure the support is around you when, you know, those mistakes happen?
Both. I think both, because pattern of mistakes that people make, and we can see it when we're working with other people. It needs somebody outside to see it. So what's the adage? If you get what you've always got, so you know, so that is something worth. But as I said earlier, there is value in making each mistake as a learning opportunity, either yourself or with help, making sure you take that learning. You won't make that mistake. I think in doing this, develop a way of making less serious mistakes, and dealing with them. And as Ms. Saunders said, mistake coming, we can't always do that. For my crystal ball to be delivered, but aware of the whole mistake making process. But I still think it's worth making mistakes. So it's not, well, it doesn't matter, I'll just make all the mistakes. Not trying to make no mistakes at all. Just in life, a question of balance, being, getting the learning and the damage.
Yeah, and what you touch on patterns, I think it is sometimes recognizing, isn't it, that by us doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result isn't going to work. And again, that's another sort of like adage that's out there. I think sometimes it does need an external catalyst to have you see that. I mean, it often happens in relationships, don't you? We go into relationships and make the same mistake with the next partner and keep going and thinking, well, what was there? Sometimes, you know, you think there's a common denominator here, usually me, by the way. You know, it is something that sometimes somebody has to, you know, highlight to you or coach you through or whatever. Jackie?
I think that's particularly true for those of us who come out and run in a small business, is because it's you on your own. And I think one of the real benefits of organisations like the business community and networking groups, which are more than just pitching up and presenting your I'm perfect front, you know, if you've got some peer support that you can bounce off, it can help you make fewer mistakes. And I think, Masunda, I think you mentioned about learning from others. It's, you know, it's in groups where people can sort of feel comfortable of saying that they didn't get something right, or they've learned this and they've tried this but this worked. Those types of groups really help you, because otherwise you're on your own and you get a very distorted view of what the world was. I know when I came into running small business, made horrendous mistakes, wasted huge sums of money on things which just didn't work. With hindsight now, you know that they don't work, but it's nice to be able to share that and to share it as a mistake. So don't do what I do, sort of thing. It's really helpful. So I would recommend to anyone who's coming into business on their own is to join some group or something where you get that open support from other members. I think
Yeah.
it's crucial.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you touched on the humility a bit earlier. I mean, I used to find it really difficult to sort of say, you know, I've cocked up, I've done something wrong, because it was in the domain of it being wrong. And I think that's a barrier, isn't it? If you think that a mistake is something that you've done that's wrong, then you're going to be a little bit reluctant to go and fess up to whoever is impacted by the consequence of your mistake. But I guess if I look back, you know, most of the times, if left untreated, if that's the right word, or unattended, then these things get worse, don't they? The mistakes usually sort of like come out in the wash, and there's more pressure on you thinking, oh, is that somebody going to find out that I've, you know, not filed that in the right place, or I've sent the email to the wrong person, or whatever it might be. And I think, you know, my experience is it is better to fess up at the end of the day, whatever you've done, and the sooner the better, because it takes pressure off you, it gives you the opportunity to take responsibility and do something about it, and anybody else that's you know, hit by that ripple effect of your mistake, it gives them the opportunity to either support you or, you know, look at explore what the mistake was, and you know, get to a common solution.
I always find if someone makes a mistake in working, it's usually things like forgetting to come to a meeting, or getting the date wrong, or the time, or things like that, or not sending me stuff. I make those mistakes, and other people make them as well. You can actually use it as a common bond. Oh, I'm glad somebody else is as divvy as I am, you know, when it comes to those things. So it can actually be a bond if you're always putting on a front of being perfect. Then people see through it in any case, and you can't sustain it. So and all you're doing is putting pressure on you. People on the whole are far more forgiving if you own up, you know. And I you know, I can think of loads of examples where people haven't done that, and then you're more reluctant to deal with them because you think, don't think he's telling me the truth there. But so that's a key thing, is to own up. If you've made a mistake, admit it. Perhaps you might like to take that advice carefully if it's something to speak to a lawyer about first.
Yeah. Judith, you were going to make a point.
Yeah, trust is this, and when people more lie, it makes them think, trust this person with something big, like your coaching. You know, would I actually want to? Because I don't have seen people on the networking service, I think have made that error. And when I was working running fairly major IT projects, I learned very quickly that if this was the case, I said, look, this is what's happening, we fix it. Very open to it. The disasters applied it to the point of lying about or whatever, and you complete. So it works in all sorts of different contexts. It's a really good point, Paul, that sooner rather than later, and you know, if you're working the outcome as much, if not, you know, they're happy to. Yeah, you know, I did it yesterday. I agreed it, and then sent the confirming email and got the wrong day back. So, oops, really sorry. There's no point in not, is there?
Yeah. But thanks for tuning in, Miss Sonda. She's made another comment there. Very true, and admission is part of the healing process. So just one final point. We'll wrap this up now, because we've done about 35 minutes, which is usually my target for these anyway. Is there any sort of final point that you'd like to make around the mistakes topic in general? Any sort of like last tip or any sort of final view that you want to add before we close? Jackie?
Oh, yes, I think practice your lovability and forgive yourself if you make a mistake.
Yeah. Judith, anything from you?
Yeah, very similar. You are a human being and you will make mistakes, a positive and a negative way of handling that. And which, as Jackie says, in yourself. Well, I don't think you need to forgive yourself, but yeah. And then if it's necessary to do so.
Yeah. I've certainly found that the sort of forgiving process, which is probably a sort of separate topic in itself, which we'll put on a hook for now, I certainly find from my point of view, you know, if I have cocked something up and, you know, or something's gone wrong with a relationship with a friend or loved one or something like that, I sometimes find that forgiving myself actually helps me deal with, you know, that mistake that I made, you know, because hopefully people don't go out of their way to deliberately make mistakes. It's just something that, you know, happens on our journey. That I sometimes do have to consciously sort of like sit down and, you know, need to forgive myself for what I said or how I said it or the impact that it had. So I think, you know, forgiveness is quite a powerful tool in well, certainly from my point of view.
I'm going to have to go now because my dog's acting weird and I think there's somebody downstairs. Okay.
Okay, well, set the dogs loose then. Thank you for today, and yeah, we'll end it there. Thanks very